Hello, I'm ibxtoycat and this is Serious Sunday, the sometimes weekly series I run on my channel where I talk about serious topics in an audio-only format. So, although there is Fortnite gameplay in the background, it's fairly mediocre, you can watch it if you really want to, but also this kind of works as a podcast so we can talk about the serious issues of the week. And the serious issues of this week aren't actually to do with the week, but they are something that's been on my mind a whole bunch because it is the topic of reinventing yourself. So, as someone who's never actually moved schools, but I've watched enough movies and read enough books where, a character moves from one school to another, the advice that always comes up is reinvent yourself, right? And this is something I even saw just when people move from class to class or school to school in my current life, where you'd see people and you'd be like, wait, you entirely changed. You weren't like that in this other class or around these other people. And it's really interesting that people, do often change like that and they do reinvent themselves all the time. Like, you figure like, oh yeah, I'm a fixed in stone personality, but you change non-stop. I even spot this in myself. Like, before I was maybe 10, I don't think I ever spoke to someone. I have no recollection in my head before the age of about 8 ever speaking to anyone. I don't know if that's just how my memory works or if I rarely spoke to anyone so none of it got memorized, but still, it's pretty wacky that like, how you could even spot that within yourself. But reinventing yourself is something you do all the time, it's something you get the advice to do all the time, and it's something that is generally a good thing to do. However, in some circles of the world, that is called being fake, right? That is called, you know how the common thing people say, well, like, oh, well, the problem with this is you changed, man, you changed, you used to be great, and now you're all terrible. Like, it's often stated as like being fake or being a bad thing when you do change, and it's really interesting that like two entirely conflicting pieces of advice exist at the same time, and some people believe one is just entirely true and well known about, and some people believe the other, and some people even believe both at the same time, like, oh, you can change, you just gotta not be fake to yourself. And the truth is, it really just comes down to like, we're trying to use words to describe more complex concepts, but that's something that I still find to just be kind of crazy. So let's talk about reinventing yourself today, because again, it's something maybe you're doing, maybe you want to do, or maybe you just think it's an interesting idea that like, oh, I really used to like Freddy, but now all he is into is motorcycles, and he also is like way more outgoing, and that's just kind of the thing. And it makes me wonder, because reinventing yourself is something you probably should do every now and then. If your whole life you've seemed like the same person, and there are some people who I have known for a majority of my life that have seemed kind of similar the whole way, but most people do change somewhere along the way pretty drastically, and there's like a billion reasons for this. Like in the case of some people, like suddenly they get attractive. In the case of some people, suddenly they get into drugs and they become a drug person. That's like at least where I'm from, it seems to be like a big deal where people like that becomes their entire point, their personality, because the truth is like who you're made up of is just like the things that you display the most. Like this is always one of the most shocking things that I guess people don't know, and even I didn't know it until a while ago, but like the clothes you wear even tells the entire world what to expect from you from the get-go. Like just by dressing slightly differently, you tell people what to expect from you, and even if you just dress in a way that like is entirely lazily, you're still showing something to the world. Just like the non-visual stuff you show off and the interests you have, that shows something. The fact that I play Minecraft, the fact that I still am passionate about it, maybe it says something to you about me. Maybe it says that you think I'm not a great person, or that like, oh, anyone who's into Minecraft has no morals. Or maybe it says, wow, yeah, if he's really into Minecraft, that means he probably also shares my interest in this or that. I don't know how you do see it, but it is quite interesting. And yeah, basically, reinventing yourself is something that you probably should do. And one of the big things about doing that to yourself is probably shifting not only your interests, because when your interests shift, you naturally, again, you favor different things, you become seen as differently, then you kind of become different. But also, it's about changing opinions, because changing opinions is something everyone is so resistant to do. If you've ever gone to an argument with someone, very few people ever go like, oh, actually, yeah, that was a good point of mind you came into the start of this with. Most arguments, they're just people getting their points off to each other, and then that's it. Like, it's good to vent, it's good to get something out there, but most arguments never go anywhere. And particularly, the biggest example of this is politics. Like, in politics, good luck trying to ever change someone else's mind, because it comes from like deeper rooted underlying values. Like, the only way to really change someone's mind is if you like convince them their existing values go to a different set of points. It's a really interesting thing, but I think the fact that most people switch political opinions at some point in their life, not because of an argument, but at some point, there's the famous quote of like, oh, if you're not a liberal when you're 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative by your 40, you have no brain. That's the Winston Churchill like making some weird statement. But it's like a commonly known thing that like, oh, people shift in one direction or the other as they age, because your opinions, even on the most fundamentally, you won't change your mind of this stuff, even that stuff changes. And honestly, something about just that last point alone, the fact that everyone changes, even on the stuff that no one changes on, shows me that like, I think most opinions must be BS. Like, the fact that you can have, again, your most fundamental core beliefs still change over time, maybe you realize it, maybe you don't, kind of signals to me that like, just because I think these things are really important to me, it actually doesn't really mean anything. Like, just, when I see people who have the opposite opinion, I don't think, wow, they're so wrong, how can they possibly think that? I think, oh, I guess there's somewhere else on the spectrum. Maybe in 20 years we'll be flipped or something. And I think being able to accept that like things change in the long run, in fact, I think being able to accept long-term thinking on anything is a really good thing. So yeah, I think changing your interests is such a bizarre thing, because honestly, when you change, you know, like the things that are outwardly perceived about you, and then you change as a result of those because people treat you differently, that is effectively everyone else changing you. But yeah, you know, if that is why, for instance, so many people who dress in a certain way act like the way that they do dress, because although you might think like, oh yeah, well they decided they wanted to have that personality, then they dress like that, sometimes it's just by becoming like that, people start treating them in a way that then leads them to, you know, behave that way. Like again, there's the really weird like societal signaling game, and I think it's kind of crazy to get too into, and I think rather than talking about it too much, because it starts to sound a little bit insane if we go too far, let's talk a little bit about something else, which is about what people dream of doing, because it's interesting that most people, most of the time, again, this is like, do you really think this about yourself? Maybe not, but most people try to do the same thing all day, every day. Like if you, you know, think about the way school works, it's routine. Think about the way works, it's a routine. Getting people into routines is something that I guess the whole of society is based around. If we had no routines, the amount of work you'd get done in a week would be drastically less. Like, you know, think about like how you are during like, for instance, like if you have like a week off, how you are on holiday, you're entirely different. Like you just sleep in all day, you barely get anything done, you know, whether good or bad. And it's quite interesting to me like how that works, that like just by having a set schedule, your brain just by default follows it. And yeah, that's what our brains are best at doing. At least most people's, some people are different, but most people's brains are just best at doing the same thing over and over and over again. I'm actually quite shocked that we even have weekends because of that, because like if every single day you woke up and then you went to work or to school or to whatever, and that was just an every day of the year, every day of your lifetime thing, I think it would be much easier to deal with. However, having the weekends in there actually kind of throws off your week, right? You know, I mentioned this very briefly before, but you know, looking forward to the weekend is what makes your week so much better, and having the weekend, knowing that the week is coming after the weekend is what makes your weekend so much more scarce and valuable. Like having 6 weeks of like free time, it's terrifying. You have no idea what to do yourself. Having 2 days of free time, it's actually much better in that way. But I think if we just had like 7 days in the week, just you're always at school, you're always working, whatever, I think it'd be easier for the brain to accept in some way. Or maybe it is that like looking forward to something. But still, I think it's kind of crazy that everyone does the same thing every single day, and that's how we work best. But yet no one dreams of that. Our dreams in our head, what we want to do, or what do we dream of doing every single day, is something different. Everyone's like, I would love it if instead of going to the meat factory today, I went skygliding. That would be amazing. Why am I not doing that? Why am I living this inferior life? And although maybe some of that is just the fact that people are always going to want more. There's never a situation where you feel like, actually, I have everything. I don't need to do anything anymore because it's all perfected. There's always something you can want more, and that's why right now, you watching this video, there's something you want right now that you don't have. I guarantee it. No one's watching this and they're like, actually, yeah, the only thing I wanted was a ToyCat video, and now I'm pretty satisfied with the world. No, there's something out there that you do want, and it's kind of crazy that everyone's brain works this way, because you almost end up in like the spiral of like, well, I mean, if I'm always going to want more, why bother going for the thing I want right now? Why not just settle into the life where I just go to the meat factory every day? And it's like, well, I mean, it's kind of about achieving those goals, right? Like, rather than just saying, oh, if I can't achieve every goal, why achieve any of them? It's just always about like, you achieve a goal, then you're happy for a bit, and then you'll achieve the next one. It's kind of like, honestly, if you think about it, difficulty levels in a video game, or just levels in general that get more difficult over time, you know, you might argue like, oh, I'm never going to complete level 100, why even do level 1? But it's like, level 1 through 80 might be fun. Like, even though level 81 is going to wreck you and you're not going to get it done ever, it's still going to be fun trying to get, you know, through to the 70s, into the 80s, etc. And I kind of think of that as like how life is sometimes. Like, well, I mean, just because there's no end to how these things are going, you do get some temporary fun from it, and sometimes through the process, you feel extra good. Sometimes people compliment you on them, you're like, wow, I was just having fun and doing my own thing, and people seem to like it. And I know that's something I think is quite interesting. So another thing that I found to be kind of related to this, and like, oh, so people like to do different things, is the fact that we have laws to stop people doing things that are too different, not to what you normally do, but what to society normally does. So yeah, again, the exact reason for laws is something where when my teacher first told me like, oh, the reason we have laws is not just because, you know, if without laws people would just murder each other, because I generally used to believe until I was like 15 that yeah, the only reason, like if there was no law stopping murder, people would just get killed all the time, like, because, you know, that one of the big reasons that stops me probably is the law. I didn't necessarily think of it that way, but obviously I did on some level, and then it's like, actually no, some people have moral objections to murdering people, and yeah, it actually is kind of true. There's a lot of laws that cover things that most of us wouldn't do anyway. Like, do you want to kill anyone right now? would, like, if you could, I'm like, okay, as Toycat, your favorite internet cat, I'm going to allow you to kill someone. If I said that to you, you know, would you want to kill someone? Probably not. Like, it's, one, it's like, you know, you feel bad about it. You'd probably, like, regret it your whole life. Two, do you really even want anyone dead? And three, imagine how much effort it would be to kill someone. Like, you know, like, you have to break into their house at night if you want to do it easily, or you have to, like, go into a real fight with them. There's risk to you. You know, there's all these reasons that you don't want to kill people. I know it seems ridiculous that I only learned that, like, as a teenager, but I swear, that's how things came up. But yeah, so basically, we have a lot of laws for things that, like, no one wants to do anyway, and then we have a lot of laws for things that everyone does anyway. So yeah, I've always thought this is the thing about the law where I'm never quite happy with it. We have lots of ways to break the law that everyone does on a regular basis. Like, I don't know how many laws you must break every day. I know in America, because jaywalking is illegal, like, I have no idea why that's the case. But in America, jaywalking is legal, so most people break the law several times, you know, every day just to and from work, for instance. You know, in the UK, I imagine it's still the same thing, like a little bit less. But there are laws you're breaking all the time for all different reasons. It's just they're not being enforced, right? And this is one of the things that, like, kind of drove me a bit crazy, because I recently had to break the law. I did something slightly illegal recently, like very, very slightly illegal. I'm not going to clarify what, just in case it comes up against me. But like I said, you know, everyone breaks the law all the time. I broke the law kind of on purpose in a not everyday way. Again, very, very, very tiny way. Like, it's theoretically punishable by, like, the tiniest of fines. It's not actually a big deal. So why do I mention that I broke the law recently? Why does that even come up? Because basically I had to do something that I didn't like to do, because it was, you know, like, again, it's like barely illegal. Like, it's technically against rules, but, like, no one ever gets prosecuted for it. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to do the best thing for the world, for the environment, and for, like, I guess it would have been good for everyone involved. But if I hadn't, you know, like, okay, so again, I don't want to clarify what I did here. I swear, I'm not murdering people, even though it makes it sound like it. Although you can believe that if you want. It was just like, I wanted to do a thing, but I needed to ask someone, even though if I hadn't asked them, they'd be fine. But if anyone had seen it or had been reported or anything in the other version, there would have been, like, real consequences for me. Like, it's a really serious crime to do the thing that would have been better for the world. So instead, I had to do, like, the tiniest, like, technically illegal, but not really thing that was bad for, like, again, the world, for everyone involved, and, like, so someone had to go through something for it. And it makes me wonder sometimes, like, why do we set things up like this? Why do we have to have this whole system where, like, oh yeah, well, I mean, there are some situations where you want to break the law less so that you don't have to avoid breaking it more, because, like, the law is really just a thing that we use sometimes. Again, it's enforced differently in different places by different people based on, like, what your thing is. And a lot of the time, my favorite thing, this is when I was like 10, this is why I was convinced the world was, there's loads of laws that exist that are never enforced until, like, oh yeah, we have a criminal that we know did something else, we can't catch him on that, so we'll just come up with a bunch of, like, pretend crimes basically to catch him on. And I've never really liked that one personally. And it's also interestingly why, even though China has some of the more strict rules in the world, they even have the Great Firewall where you can't access Facebook and Google, it's so easy to sidestep the laws. It's so easy, you know, they're so rarely enforced in major cities even, that you're basically free to do whatever you want in China, as long as you're not directly hurting someone else. And I think that's an interesting thing to me, that, like, no matter how hard you try to, like, have a written down set of rules that stop people from hurting each other, eventually you're gonna, you know, have it so that people have to hurt each other to not break one of the rules, or, you know, that this people are gonna have to do something that's, you know, bad for something or other, you know, like I said I did, in exchange for not hurting, you know, like, the rules, or not hurting someone else. Then instead they actually end up hurting the system. And again, no matter how hard you try to write it down, trying to cover every situation is impossible. One of the fun facts about laws is, like, the reason it takes so long to pass a law, you might think, oh, why don't we just you know, ban X, or why don't we just add X, or why don't we just make it so that we spend Y amount on Z, or stop, you know, Z people from doing Y, you know, whatever exact thing you're thinking about. But why don't they just do that instantly? The reason that, like, we have lawmakers is because they have to go through it. They have to think, oh, this could be used for this could be used to catch out those people, what about this exact situation? They have to come up with all these weird exceptions, all these weird rules. And the truth is, even after they spend all that time doing it, you know, these are professionals we hire just to do this, there's still a billion loopholes that end up in there. That's why people eventually can go free on something, and that's it. Basically, there is loopholes in laws all the time. There's loopholes in the justice system all the time, and that's after we go through all this effort trying to make it cover everything. And I honestly think sometimes, like, what if we had a system like China where either we had, like, technically everything was illegal, like, by default, you can, again, I think this is terrible. I really disagree with this on a personal level. But in theory, if we just made it so, like, guess what? By being in this country, you are illegal. Like, breathing air, that's illegal. You can go to prison for as long as we decide. On the one hand, that sounds terrifying because at any point in time they can take you away for it. But on the other hand, if you just it just means that like you can do anything you want until it's too egregious to someone else, and then they do the thing to you. Or what if? Okay, here's a system I kind of like. Again, it's a terrible idea, but I'm down with it. What if whenever there's no rules in place, nothing is legal, except at any point in time, anyone that wants to, they can go to court and they can like try and give you some number of like years in prison. Let's just say like someone has to confirm that they're not mentally ill or something, so they can say, you did this to me, I didn't like that, I would like to send you to prison for a number between 1 and 12 months or something, and you have to go to prison too. And you can be like, okay, but if you do that, I'm sending you away for 12 too. And then the only way they can send you to prison for that long is if they do the same thing to themselves. I know, I feel like the way justice works right now, it's like broken, but it's like, how do we fix it? And I feel like if we don't have a good system, let's come up with a crazy one. Let's at least have a fun system, like what if, okay, well, you've done something that someone said was wrong, and we're not sure if you did it, so how about you go to the Colosseum, you fight off a bunch of wolves, and if you can kill all the wolves, then maybe the entertainment value we got from that, like, adds to the society pull back to what you're doing. I know, I feel like there has to be, like, some great solution. I even think, like, we should have every like kind of like prison-based thing, rather than like sending you to a dangerous place filled with dangerous people. Because I think actually, I actually consider this one too. Like, what is the scariest thing about prison? It's the people in prison, right? Like prison itself, like being locked somewhere, like that's not so bad. But the idea that like people there will do things, they do some things. Wait, when you first learn the things the people do in prison, you're like, oh yeah, actually, I'm gonna make an extra concerted effort not to break the law. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that like laws work the way they do, and also if you did go to prison, or maybe you statistically like. Some people who are subscribed to the Toycat channel have gone to prison, or maybe right now you're going to go to prison. If you go there, you could like reinvent yourself and you could become a whole new person. And in fact, it actually is entirely encouraged. When you go to prison, you're actually encouraged to go in there and not only just like, oh yeah, be a different person, but be like a tougher person. It's like the advice, like you don't want to get beaten up by anyone. You want to make sure you're the alpha dog or whatever. So everyone reinvents themselves for prison. And what I think is crazy about that is because sometimes when they come out of prison, they'll still be that reinvented person. And it makes me question, like, if you can change yourself so much that you don't want to change back, or you can't change back, or you don't even realize that you were something before, what even is a person at that point? Like, if you can change yourself, because at one point, I changed one of my memories. I went in there, again, it's really weird that you can do this, but I was like, what if I changed this memory to be slightly like this instead? And I don't actually remember what memory it was at this point, but I know it worked, and I was like, wait, is that real? And now it's just like stuck in the memory backlog. So maybe one of my like key childhood memories is made up or something. But yeah, basically, if I can change my memories, if you can change your own memories too, whether you realize it or not, and if you can change your entire sense of self, what even is a person? And I guess the only real thing is like, it's a continuous series of memories, but then you say, but actually you forget a lot of memories, you can invent the memories, it's like, I guess a person is just a continuous series of existence. It's like a score sheet, or like a character that you play in a video game, like, oh yeah, the same thing that plays about Mario Kart yesterday when I played him, and when I played Mario in Mario Kart yesterday, and when a friend plays him today, is that he has the same stats, the same speed. So like, the only thing that you have when you're playing life as yourself, again, I know this is like next level crazy, is like the same stats exist there. So I think one of the big things that like, the big like lessons of like, if you have an existential crisis about who am I, what am I doing, is like, think about yourself in terms of like pure stats. If you started being you just now, what would you want to get? If you started being you in like a year's time, what would you want the most from it? And it's like, yeah, I guess I should, eat healthily, or I guess I should, focus on getting, doing well at school, or getting a promotion at my job, or whatever you need to do to make your life impressive. Like, I was going to say from the outside, but also from the inside. Like, I guess, make your life as good as it can be to someone who just started being you today. And then that's, I think, how you define who you are, like, by the set of things that you immeasurably, can't remove. Like, no, unless you really try hard, it's impossible to like get rid of, your knowledge about something, or your wealth. Actually, it's quite easy to get rid of wealth. Fun fact. All you have to do is donate to @ibxtoycat. But more seriously, I think the question of like who you are is one that you never ever get to the bottom of. But at some point, we actually will. Like, again, for right now, it's like, who is a person? What do you want to be? You can define yourself by anything you want to. Like, even though I said, like, oh, I define myself by, like, the kind of immutable, like, the ones that the characteristics you can't change, you can define yourself as, like, oh, I've seen some people, like, other, because I've said this before, but YouTubers are crazy. I've seen some YouTubers who define themselves by this, like, weird clicky thing. Like, you know, I am a goth. That's who I am. This is a thing. I am someone who really likes, you know, steaks, or, you know, whatever you want to define yourself as. People define themselves in jokes, but whatever else you want to. The truth is right now, you're actually able to just kind of pick what you want, because we don't know. And even if we did know, like, you can still decide it as how you want. But I kind of like there's this beautiful situation right now that won't be true in, like, 50 or 100 years when we understand the brain fully, and we're like, oh yeah, well, actually, the part of you that you feel like is you is actually just this weird membrane right here. We can cut it out, and then you're not existent anymore. You know, as soon as we get that level, things will be a bit weird. But right now, at the very least, you can define yourself as whatever you want. You can think of yourself as whatever you want, and you can be whatever you want as a part of that. Like, what you can pick a part of you that you decide is like me. Like, oh yeah, Andrew is the person who really apparently likes talking fast, really likes video games, really likes traveling, and also has a British accent and likes the world and stuff. Like, you know, like, maybe if you want to define yourself like that, everything else you can then say, but I'm down to change that. Like, actually, I'd like to start working out or something, you know. I'll be a gym guy who has, like, you know, huge arms or whatever else. You can be that guy if you want to. I think this is the best thing about this is, like, no matter how bad you mess up in life, unless you do go to prison, like I just said, in which case I think there is, like, some permanent, like, track on you, like, well, you've done some bad things before, you might do them again. But unless you've done something so bad that it's, like, a permanent record, I think also, like, borrowing money has, like, the same effect on borrowing money. But again, besides these very specific areas, and even then they're not the biggest of deals, no matter how bad you mess up, you can always come back from it better. Even if you think you messed up and, like, it's all my fault 'cause I'm a bad person, you can always be a better person. That's the great thing. You know how before I was like, you know, actually probably the reason that I'm not killing someone is because of prison. Like, that's all I'd ever thought about it. You know, as soon as I realized, like, oh, there's other reasons. I don't want to, you know, killing people wouldn't be good. You know, it's not great for you. Then immediately that becomes me. And, you know, it's redeemed as long as I hadn't actually killed someone. Then it wouldn't be. Even though, like, I'm trying to think, like, what's the, like, worst kind of embarrassing things? At one point when I was, like, when I first went to a brand new school and I met some new people the first time, I think I tried to impress them by eating sticks. You know, there are still, like, 2 people or 3 people in the world that still have some memory of, like, that kid tried to impress us by eating sticks, or, like, maybe it was grass or something. It was like something really ridiculous or stupid. Even at one point when I was, like, 7, I remember I drank puddle water because I was like, I'm thirsty, the toilets are locked. This is water too, let's go for it. Like, someone is gonna remember me by those things, and that's kind of fine, but I'm no longer, okay, you know, let me tell you something I'm really proud of. I am no longer a puddle water drinker. I do not drink puddle water anymore. I am no longer a person who has eaten sticks. The last time I ate sticks was, like, 13 years ago now, like, more than half my life ago, and although some people have some memory of it, one, if you change and that doesn't become a part of you, then most people will forget the thing anyway, and 2, it doesn't have to be you. You won't do it again, and that's kind of important. And I think that's the kind of great thing about all of this. Like, when changing yourself is not just something you do because you're in a new environment, it's something you can do in your existing environment, because you'll do it slowly and people won't notice. And although 1 or 2 people might be like, wait a minute, this guy is different, most people are just like, they accept that people are changing all the time. Think about anyone you knew 5 years ago and how different they are today. Like, I guess not, wait, anyone not that you knew closely, but that you knew from a distance. Because if you know someone closely, you see their changes non-stop. But if you think about, like, oh yeah, that's like a girl that I used to, you know, I spoke to precisely twice when I was, like, 15, and then you look at them when they're, you know, 18, or if they're, like, 13 to 15, or whatever age group you think about, the amount of change they can have, like, they've changed entirely, right? And you're like, whoa, they're kind of different now. Actually, I think they're kind of great. Or, wow, you were great before, and now they look, you know, now they suck. You can kind of think about that with you. Like, some people are going to change, and that's the great thing about reality. So yeah, no matter how bad a thing you've done in the past, I think the beautiful thing, and, you know, this is probably, like, some of the things where, like, biblical lessons come from, like, from the same thing, but much more simplified, of, like, guess what? You can change, you can go past that. If you define yourself as the person who did the bad thing, then you'll probably keep doing bad things. If you say, actually, I'm better than that, then you probably will do better, because, yeah, most people don't want to do bad things, except one of the things, you know, which is why we have a law system that is a bit weird, because we should have it based around the fact that most people don't want to do bad things. We should try and isolate the people who do bad things and, like, separate them from the rest. But yeah, most people, I like the idea of a system where we just kind of let people do whatever and see what happens, at least, like, as an experiment. Like, why don't we just go look at a map and be like, okay, let's go to North Dakota, let's remove all laws, every single one of them, and then we'll like put a border up around it or something. Or let's just take an area of the world and just see what happens without any laws after 100 years. I'd love to see what happens there, because do people want to do good things themselves without the legal incentive? Does that change things? Or do people just, keep on being better and better people? Because, prison's meant to help you be a better person, but it never does. What if people do that themselves? Like, oh, I killed a guy and I feel bad about it every night, and now I don't kill people anymore. Or maybe like just one person kills the entire state. I'm not sure which happens, but it'd be interesting to see, right? It'd be interesting to see at the very least. So, yeah, one other thing, speaking of like changing things and making decisions for yourself, I actually have been cooking a fair amount in the past few weeks. Like, I started when I got one of those meal boxes. I did a Cooking with Toycat stream. I made a horrific looking lamb burger that was actually delicious. Like, I kind of want to make one of those again, or like order the same kit. But yeah, I started cooking a whole bunch more recently, and I've been making a whole bunch of different things, some basic, some complex. Like, one of the time, but the crazy thing about no matter what I made, it would always taste amazing. Even if it was something, so I made something called a cassolette. I still don't know what that is, but I had lentils in there. I cooked the lentils entirely wrong. I think you wanted to have the sauce in there, and I just had like the pure lentils themselves. So it was basically just lentils and sausages, and then like a couple of vegetables on the side. But it was delicious. I loved it so much. It like actually looked pretty fancy and stuff. And yeah, basically I got like really into cooking. And no matter what you cook, because you feel like you did good, it's interesting that like that feeling of doing good kind of converts into the meal. And I honestly, I think about this as like, that must be how restaurants work, right? Like, you have a chef who's doing some crazy stuff, and he believes this crazy stuff is making the food so good, and because he's so proud of it, that's what makes food great. Because I used to think that restaurants were like really intensely trained people spending 40 minutes on something, and 40 minutes was like so long. Like, think about the time between ordering and getting food sometimes. It sometimes takes forever, and if they're making it from scratch or whatever, you think, wow, they must be spending so much time. But the truth is they often spend like, 5 minutes to microwave it, or they do something like that, or, even if they're making it from scratch, they're making a bunch of things at once. Like, there's no special care put into your dish ever, right? But even then, because you think it's going to be great, because you're like, yeah, I love this restaurant food. They always, it's always good stuff. You have the memories attached. That kind of changes how things are. And yeah, I think it's interesting that the same things that we apply to people, the same concept of like, oh yeah, I remember this person as being like this, therefore he's going to be like that in the future. That same thing applies to so many other things in life. Like, I drink water every day. I still like water just because I've been thirsty a few times and it tastes great then. That taste of like how water is when it's like great, that's always in my head. The taste of, like drinks from a glass bottle, like a Coke or something, when it comes from glass, it's just like, oh, this is so much better. Even though like glass does change it a little bit, it's mostly just about like, oh, at some point I had a really good Coke from a glass bottle, and now it just like tastes extra wonderful, right? This is the same reason people shop at the same store every week, because like, oh, I did this before and it's kind of great. And it actually goes back to my previous point on like, people like to do the same thing over and over again because it's consistently good. One of the hardest things you have to do for yourself ever is convincing yourself to do new things, because I'm 23 right now. I hopefully have another 2/3 left of my life, maybe a bit more, like 3/4 maybe, but I have something like, more than the majority of my life left, hopefully, if I don't die in some horrible train wreck. So, assuming that doesn't happen, and I do live for all those years, that means that I've only lived for like a tiny portion of my total. So if I do have a favorite food by the end, I probably wouldn't find it now. You'd probably find the best stuff about a third, about 40% into your life. So yeah, for the first like all that time, it's really important not to just find something and stick to it. I always try to mix things up, and I always try to do things different, and that's how you find the new best thing. That's how you find the new nostalgia of like best of the best. But again, no matter how good how good a place does a burger, I'll always love Five Guys, because the first time I went in there and I just found it, and like I had a crazy long line, and the dude spoke to me and it was like, oh, I recommend this, and it was just the best burger. Just that like memory of the best burger. Like, it's food nostalgia. Like, nostalgia, you think of it as being just a thing that you get for like, people and maybe video games, but you get it, you get it for games, you get it for like places. Like, people, love certain places just because they went there once or sometime great. You get it for drinks, you get it for all these different things. Maybe you even get it for YouTube. Maybe you thought I sucked a while ago, but you're remembering that first time you watched a Toycat video and you love it, and that's why you're here. I'm not entirely sure, but what I will say is that good nostalgia is much better than, like, bad nostalgia. Like, if something was, like, nostalgically bad, you can often fix it immediately, but it takes a long series of bad events to fix something good, and that's honestly, like, going back to my whole point of, like, that's why you can reinvent yourself, and you'll, even if you were just a purely bad person, you can really quickly turn it around. But no matter what good you had in you, some people will remember that good, and some people we'll always appreciate it, whether you know them or not. And yeah, that's kind of the end point here for today's little podcast style thing. Let me know if you liked the Serious Sunday, and I guess there's a couple of ways you can use a comment down below, or if you really like it, because obviously podcasts on YouTube, they do bad, like even if it's like a proper podcast, whereas this is just like a long series of ramblings over Fortnite. But if you really like the Serious Sunday and you want to like make it be a weekly series, or like make it like an actual regular thing rather than like I alternate this once every 2, sometimes 3 weeks, then what I would recommend you do, like this is like my show some support back and like show me what if you really are that into it, go to gaming.youtube.com/toycat/live. I'll leave a link down below. It's my YouTube gaming page. There is a sponsorship option there, so it's a monthly subscription to the channel. You get access to an exclusive Discord, you get access to exclusive emojis. But if a lot of people do that today, I'll take that as a real message that people want this series to continue, and even though it's not either financially viable or YouTubely viable, that it is something that I should keep doing, because I really love doing these things, and I want to know if like you really enjoy them, or if it's nostalgia of that first time you watched me or not. Let me know with a comment down below, or by going to that page and sponsoring, because I can see when people did it. If a lot of people do it today, then I'll take that as an impression that yeah, let's keep this up. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.